Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Reagan Library. My name is Janet Tran, and I have the privilege of serving as the Chief Learning Officer here at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. I was a little concerned about how to get you excited for today, but apparently I can skip that. I want you to know, if you haven't been here before, that at the Reagan Library, we start all of our programs with the Pledge of Allegiance. And today, we are joined by the Royal High School Air Force JROTC Color Guard and a local student leader. So in honor of the men and women who wear our uniform and serve our country, please rise for the presentation of colors, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please.
Okay. All right. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Ivan, for leading us in the pledge. Thank you. Yes. So before we begin today's program, I hope that you'll indulge me in a few recognitions in an audience of very important people all around. I first want to recognize our new president and CEO, Mr. Dave Trulio. Ms. Joanne Drake, our Chief Administrative Officer and representative of the Reagan family. And I'm particularly grateful to Ms. Melissa Giller, who is our Chief Marketing Officer. And it was her dedication that was instrumental to bringing Auschwitz not long ago, not far away, here to the Reagan Library. And I'm incredibly grateful and thankful for that. And other members of our senior team throughout as well. And also, if you're a teacher, please wave here. You did a lot. You did a lot. We have 1,000 students here today and 600 more who wanted to attend and couldn't be here, but because you had the craftiest teachers in Ventura County, you are in the room today, so thank you, teachers. And I had the opportunity to meet a few of the incredible 11 family members and supporters of Mr. David Lenga, and thank you so much for being here today. I would like you and anyone who is a Holocaust survivor or family member of a Holocaust survivor or victim to please stand so we can recognize your story and your truth. We welcome you here today. Please stand. Finally, to our young people who comprise the majority of our audience today, our education team has worked tirelessly to organize this event just for you. And today, I have so much gratitude that we are all here in this room together on Yom HaShoah, or Holocaust Remembrance Day. But what are we asking you to remember exactly about the Holocaust? It is in remembrance of the approximately 6 million Jews who lost their lives, who were murdered during the Holocaust. Those numbers, they're staggering. They are overwhelming. They are, some would say, incomprehensible. Yet in 1988, when President Reagan dedicated the site of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., he insisted the Holocaust is comprehensible. Indeed, we must comprehend it. We have no choice. The future of mankind depends upon it. So this is why we've invited you here today to remember, and why you will return to visit our Auschwitz Not Long Ago, Not Far Away exhibit, so that we understand, so that we remember that every one of the 6 million murdered was a son or a daughter like you, a mother or a father, a brother or a sister. Every single person had a story, a unique story, and we must never reduce the Holocaust to mere numbers or statistics. And since I think I'm safe to assume that most of the teachers who brought you here weren't math teachers, I'm going to make the case that the number 1 is actually larger than 1 million. You may not be able to learn everyone's story, but you can understand one person's story. You may not be able to help 1 million people, but you can certainly start with 1. All of you have the power to do that here today. So I invite you to listen with your whole heart and with a solemn obligation to try and understand how so much hate and bigotry can come to pass. And I know that's no small feat, but we begin with one man's story and the experiences he lived through when he was about the age you were sitting in these chairs today. So try to keep that in mind. And after he's done sharing, you may have a chance to ask him questions so that you can better truly comprehend, truly understand, and remember alongside him. I won't go into a long intro, as he's here to share it himself, but only briefly to recognize his humanity, that Mr. Lenga was born in 1927 in Poland to loving parents, Abraham and Sarah, and a family that he adored, and at the age of 11, war changed the trajectory of his life. He's a survivor, a beacon of hope, overcoming loss and tragedy, despair and suicidal thoughts, and harrowing conditions throughout the Holocaust, including time incarcerated in Auschwitz, the largest death camp in Nazi Germany, and a symbol of genocide around the world. For David Lenga, Auschwitz is not long ago, and is not far away at all. So, Mr. Lenga, I know that I speak on behalf of the Reagan Foundation when I say we're humbled that you are here and you've helped us open this most significant exhibit, and astounded that you're here with us on Yom HaShoah, sharing stories that are so difficult to share so that our next generation can and will remember. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great honor that I invite to the stage Mr. David Lenga.
Thank you so very much for attending this event. My name is David Lenga, and I'm a 95-year-old Holocaust survivor. I feel compelled and impelled to tell my story especially to young people, but to all the people that may not know what I know, how important it is. My life did not start with the Holocaust. I was born in 1927 in the second largest city in Poland called Łódź. And I was born into a rather well-to-do family. My father was a manufacturer. I had many good friends. Life was good, the way I knew it. I had a loving, large family. Actually, the family from my father's and mother's side consisted of approximately 100 people. And when the war ended and the Holocaust ended, I and only my dad survived the war. 98 of my family members perished in the Holocaust by Nazi hands. But what I went through is something that is unique to me, probably, because each Holocaust survivor has his own unique story. And as I said, I did not grow up in the Holocaust. I happened to grow up in a loving society. The Jewish family, the Jewish community in Poland was large and vibrant. We had many synagogues, many institutions, 5 Jewish newspapers. We had an infrastructure which was the envy of many. We had a high level of culture, and people were thriving in this environment. Poland was a Catholic majority country, just like the rest of Europe. The Jewish people that found themselves in Poland, 3 million of them, learned how to accommodate their life in a majority country that was not Jewish. It wasn't easy. What we know today as anti-Semitism was pretty much felt at every level. I felt it deeply and keenly and early in life because the people that I surrounded myself with, by necessity, were not Jewish people. They were Christians. And we learned how to live together as a community in a modus vivendi, if you will. We just accepted the realities of life. There was anti-Semitism, yes, but we somehow managed to coexist. And so in 1939, in September the 1st, a name and a date that I will never forget, I was 11 years old. I found myself on a streetcar going an errand for my parents. And suddenly, the sirens of the city came on blaring, and the adults around me knew exactly what that meant. It meant imminent danger. It meant a danger that may come from any quarter, and we didn't know quite what that was. I didn't know what it was. And so minutes later, after the sirens blaring and everything came to a dead stop, and people ran for their lives, the adults especially, and I was bewildered as a kid, didn't know where to go. I was 11 years old, and I ran also for cover. And then suddenly, before we had a chance to get out of that streetcar, an armada of German attack planes descended upon us and came down very low and machine gunned everything and everybody in sight. And a river of blood appeared in front of me. I was horrified, as everybody else was, and we tried to run to the adjacent buildings for cover. I did too. But after the onslaught ended about a half an hour later, the entire scene was a slaughterhouse. This is a picture that can never be erased from my memory. I didn't know how to interpret it. I couldn't wrap this around my head. I was too young to understand exactly what was happening. But what was happening, folks, is that this was the outbreak of World War II. It was the outbreak of the Holocaust. Hitler attacked Poland without declaring war in a sudden, what they called ein Blitzkrieg in German, and that means a lightning war. And that lightning war took everybody in Europe by surprise, because no nation in Europe was prepared for it. Hitler prepared himself for this onslaught early on against the international agreements that he had after World War I. The divisions that happened in Europe were not very satisfactory to him, and so there was a lot of dissatisfaction that the German people experienced, and he, being the demagogue, set it out so that he is able to rearm Germany to the teeth. They become the mightiest army in Europe, and nobody could withstand their onslaught. Poland crumbled within 3 days, and the Holocaust started almost immediately. As soon as they occupied Poland, the Holocaust started, because all over the city, the Germans plastered announcements that the Jews are no longer able to work or to go to school or to enjoy any civil rights. I was deprived of my future education. All I managed at that point was to finish the 5th grade. I was about your age. My brother, that was 4 years younger than me, he was a kid. And so we found ourselves in a situation with the first few days of the occupation of our city that the Germans occupied, and they made known their intentions what to do with the Jewish people. They started implementing the Holocaust. We were taken away from our city of Lodz because my father was a manufacturer, they knew about it, and we were forced to resettle to the small city of Strykov, which was north of the city of Lodz where we lived. We had that manufacturing there, and the Germans proclaimed to my dad, he told him, that the factory is being confiscated. It belongs now to the Third Reich, and from here on, you are required to work for the German army to produce leather, goods, and clothing in your factory. And they said to him that we will supply you with raw materials, and you are required to supply the labor from among the Jewish people of that city of Strykov. And so it was. And within days, they created a perimeter around that small city of Strykov, and it became, in effect, a ghetto. It became a ghetto. The Jews were not allowed to get out from that perimeter by any means unless they had military permission. And in that city, being deprived of everything that we had in our own residence in the bigger city of Lodz, because when they took us away, we were not allowed to take anything with us, nothing except a shirt and our bags. So my father and mother, my brother and my grandma, my mother's mom, were allowed to follow us. And so we settled there in a confiscated house that belonged to somebody else. And there we had to work and slave and live and stay within this perimeter. It was a horrible existence because the Germans had a policy of annihilation, and they did it in a way that was calculated. They starved us. They undernourished us. We were constantly hungry in that ghetto. People were dying. There was no access to a hospital or medicine. If somebody got sick, that was it. No way out. You die and that's it. And so this is the existence that I found myself in as well. In that city of Strykov, where we were laboring and dying and starving, for 2 years, after 2 years, the Germans decided to eliminate the small ghettos around Poland and consolidate the labor, the able-bodied men and women, to take them away and throw them into already established large ghettos and larger cities. Lodz was one of those cities that had a large established ghetto in 1942. They were raiding us, and they were telling us to abandon our homes, stand on the street, and they made selections who was able-bodied and who was not able-bodied. With the thumb, of the movement of the thumb, they determined who is going to live and who is going to die. When the line started forming and my mom stood in front of me, I stood behind her, and my brother stood behind me, and then my grandma. And then as the line moved forward, he looked at my mom, the soldier in front, and he evidently felt that she was able-bodied enough to work, because after all, she was only 41 years old at that time, 1942. And so he motioned to her to go to the right, to the ghetto to work, and I saw this. When my turn came and my brother's turn came, he looked at us, we were children. He told us to go to the left, with all the people that they considered no longer able-bodied, the old, the infirm, the frail, and they took us away from my mom and my brother and I, and they shoved us off into a huge warehouse outside the city, along with those people that were selected for their death. We were destined to die there. In that warehouse, after waiting hours on end, not knowing what to expect next, suddenly a bullhorn comes on loud and clear and says, "David Lenga, come to the front door." Of all the people, me? Why? I was only 14 years old at that time. So I said to my brother, "Did you hear my name called?" And he says, "Yes, loud and clear, go see what I want." So I said, "Nathan, you sit right here, I'll be right back for you." And so I go up to the front door, and as I approached, this burly, menacing-looking man looks at me and he says, "Are you David Lenga?" And I said, "Yes, I am." He says, "You come out of here." You open the door, he says, run for your life, get back into the ghetto." And I said, "What about my brother? He's here, I want him with me." "Never mind your brother," he says, "we'll take care of him." And so I frightened, I was scared, I ran for my life, and I ran back to the ghetto. And I came in the ghetto, the first thing I did is I came to my home, and I expected my mom to be there, but she wasn't there. My aunt was there, her older sister. And I says, "And Bina, what happened to Mom? Why isn't she here?" She knew what it was, but she wouldn't tell me. I was too agitated. She said, "Sit down, calm down, I'll tell you." And she says, she probably went to look for you boys. I said, this cannot happen. So, to make a long story short, I realized my mom is not coming back. And then when she finally broke down and told me what was happening, I became very, very despondent because I knew now I'm a total orphan. I lost my mom, my dad, my brother. Everybody I loved is gone from my life. Nothing left. And I became suicidal. I really did. I wanted to end it all. And about a few days later, I find myself going up on an abandoned house in the attic, and I tried to pry open a rusty window at the attic to throw myself down from the third floor and end my life. And as I was attempting to open that rusty window, my aunt was after me. She knew I was dangerous to myself. And so she grabbed me by the scruff of my neck, pulled me back, and she says, I'm not going to let you do it. You cannot do it because if you lose hope, there is nothing left. You must not ever lose hope. And she pulled me back. She says, you will live with us, me and my son. The three of us will make a family and do the best we can. When my mom realized that she lost her children, she said to her sister that she was to go back to the line, go where her children are. Whatever happens to them will happen to her. And her sister wouldn't let her do this. She says, you have to find another way of finding a solution to this. You cannot just do this, it's dangerous. So she says, what else can I do? She says, your brother-in-law is the head of the factory, of the clothing factory in that city. He knows a lot of people. Talk to him. Maybe he can pull some strings and free your boys. So she went to him, and she pleaded with him to help her get her two boys back. But he, like everyone else, was just another Jewish person in the ghetto, had no power, and he told us so. I have no power to the Germans. I cannot tell them what to do. Nobody listens to me. I cannot help you. And my mom reported back to the line and told the SS she wants to be where her children are. And they took her away. And from that point on, I never saw my mom again. Because of course I was suicidal. But life went on. I had to work every day. It was a must, because if you don't work, you get the rations. If you don't get the rations, you don't get any food. And so you starve yourself to that. You cannot do that. So I had to work every day, long hours, back-breaking work. And that served as some kind of a therapy for me, believe it or not. Because when you work, you have to put your mind to work, and you cannot think of too many things else. And life went on. And I learned slowly to accept the inevitable. And so for 2 years in the ghetto, working in the clothing factory, I acquired a skill. My uncle, which was the head of the factory, was an excellent couturier. He was very well known in the city. He took me under his wings, and he taught me every facet of cloth production, and I became a tailor. I acquired a trade that saved my life during the war. I'm telling you all this because as a kid, thrown into this crucible, I was somehow finding ways of survival at that time, from day to day even. And that built a certain resilience in me, I believe. So what happened next? The ghetto was dissolved in 1944, 2 years later. I was 16. The Allies came closer and closer to the city of Lodz, to Poland. Unbeknownst to us, because we were kept in the dark all that time, unbeknownst to us, the Allies made great strides. The Germans lost very many battles in Stalingrad and Leningrad and in Moscow. And the Allies, the Americans and the British and the French resistance, they all came from different directions towards Germany. We all know what happened in Normandy, the breakthrough, and suddenly the Germans felt a great pressure because the Russians came too close. They did not want to leave the concentration camps in Russian hands, knowing what they did, the mayhem. So they decided to eliminate the Lodz ghetto in 1944 and to take all those able-bodied men and women and ship them off in cattle cars to Germany proper to work in the building industry, to build bunkers, to work in munitions factories, and so forth, repair railroad tracks that were bombed by the Allies. Backbreaking work. So I find myself being taken away from the ghetto and Lodz and transported in cattle cars, supposedly to Germany proper. After many days in those cattle cars, without food or water, without the means to alleviate yourself, squeezed together like sardines, one against the other. Many people didn't survive the journey. When we finally came to a stop, many days later, and the doors opened up, flung open, and I find myself looking at the tarmac with so many German soldiers on one side with dogs and machine guns, and on the other side, a whole contingent of prisoners with striped clothing. I was bewildered, and I said to one of the prisoners there, "Am I in Germany?" "No, you're not in Germany. You're in Auschwitz," they told me. And I had never heard of the word Auschwitz. I didn't even know what it was. And so I says, "What is Auschwitz?" So he says, "Oh, you don't know, do you?" "No, I don't know." "Well, turn around." So I did. I turned around and I said, what about? He says, "You see that huge, tall chimney rising up in the air with black smoke coming out of it?" I says, "Yeah, I see it. So what?" He says to me, "That's where you wound up, in that smoke." And I thought this man is out of his mind. You must be mad. What are you saying? Why would I wind up there? He says, "Believe me, that's where you wind up." And so before we knew what was happening, we were rounded up and put on trucks and actually taken to Auschwitz concentration camp itself. When I came closer to the gate, I saw an incredible sign that says, "Arbeit macht frei." That means work will set you free. That sign is still there today in the museum. And I just couldn't understand any of it. When I came inside, and there I was shown the barracks where I was supposed to sleep and live, these were cubicles. Cubicles where only 3 people were assigned to one cubicle to sleep. No mattress, no pillows, no blankets, just plain wooden planks. Worse than you treat an animal. And there we were. And people were starving, literally. And in Auschwitz, I couldn't sleep when the first few days. I just couldn't sleep because the sirens outside were blaring deafeningly. And I said to the people that were before me, "Excuse me, but why are these sirens constantly blaring like that 24/7? And he says, "Oh, they are making constant raids on the camp." "Raids like what?" "Well, they're sifting through the population and they're deciding those that are able-bodied stay and those that they consider no longer able-bodied, they're being selected to die in the crematoria." I said, "Do they have a system by which they go? Do they have names? Do they have a list? Do we know who's next?" No. Everything is random. And when I realized that everything is random, I said to myself, I could be next. I was scared, folks. I was petrified. I didn't know what to do. So next day, in the courtyard of that camp, I saw a long line of men lined up. And I went to the last one in line and I said, "Are you here for food?" He says, "No, we are here to be selected to go to Germany proper to work in their factories there." Because Auschwitz was not Germany, Auschwitz was in Poland. And so I said, "What kind of a workers are they looking for?" And he says, "Anyone in the building trade, carpenters, bricklayers, welders, engineers, surveyors, anyone in the building trade." Well, I was none of those. I was a tailor. They didn't need me, and I knew it. But I was so desperate to try to get out of this hellhole, Auschwitz, I wanted to just escape. And so I got in line anyway. Because I was thinking to myself, everybody has striped clothing, everybody is clear shaven, everybody looks like everybody else, like a clone, and if my own brother would stand next to me, I wouldn't probably recognize him. So I figured, okay, I'll stand in line like everybody else, and I did. At that point, I was like 16 years old. That was in 1944. And I was emaciated, of course. And I stayed in line, and everybody else in line in front of me was much older than I was. And I could hear these people as they come close to the officer facing them that made the selections. They were announcing what they can do. I'm a carpenter, ich bin ein Tischler, ich bin ein Schleifer, all kinds of trades in the building trade. And when my turn came, the man looks at me in my eyes and he starts laughing at me. And he says, "What the hell are you doing here? You're a kid. You still got your mother's milk on your lips. What are you doing here? Get out of here." Throws me out of line, back into the camp. And at that point I became despondent. I said, I wanted to get out. So I turned around and I didn't take this for an answer. And I says, "I got to try again." I says, "He probably won't recognize me because everybody looks like everybody else." And so I get back in line. And the second time around when my turn came, he looks at me, recognized me right away, just like that. And he throws me out of the line. And he says, "If I see you one more time here, I kill you." And I knew he meant business. And so I couldn't do this again. So disheartened, that day passed. The next day, I come back out on the courtyard and I see a strange sight. I see two very burly men carrying a bucket that is suspended on a heavy pole. One in the front has the one end of the pole on the shoulder, and the other one in the back has the other end of the shoulder. And they are walking towards an area, and I approached them and I said, "Excuse me, what are you doing? Who are you? What's happening here?" And he says, "We are taking in the soup to the people that were already selected to go to Germany to work. They are now in a closed-in area, and we have to take the soup to them before they leave Auschwitz." The minute he said that, a light popped up in my head. I was so street smart at such an early age. And I just put my shoulder under the pole in front of this guy in the back, and I said, "The three of us are going to be taking in that soup to that holding area." He was furious. He says, "You can't do that. They know it's only two of us. You're putting us in trouble." I says, "No, you're putting us all in trouble if you make a big fuss about it. Just keep your mouth shut. Let me walk." He gritted his teeth. He had no choice, and we walked into the holding area. The minute they put down the bucket of soup, I disappear among the 200 men that were already selected to go to Germany. And I find myself among them. And I hid. I was like a shadow. I didn't want to be heard or seen. For 2 hours, we were waiting after they finished eating the soup. The trains came, and I decided to enter that train the very first, not the last or the second. Didn't want to take any chances. And so I did. Now the Germans, being who they were very particular about everything. They kept very good records of everything. They knew there were 200 men counted to go to Germany. So they counted them into the car. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so 1, 2, 3, 4. And so by the time the 200 person was counted, the doors shut, close, and I find myself in the car going actually to Germany, out of Auschwitz. That is the surreptitious way that I escaped Auschwitz in a relatively short time. So that car started moving on, but before it happened, as soon as it closed, I could hear a man protesting outside, loud. He says, I was selected. I was selected. Folks, this was the 200th man that I took his place, and he was left out. I didn't have any pity in my heart for this man. I didn't feel any compunction that I did something wrong to deprive him of escaping Auschwitz. Because at that point, after so much suffering, I, like all others, were dehumanized to such a degree that we did not have any compassion left in our heart. All we could think of is, how do I survive the next moment? How do I survive the next hour? That was the prime objective, self-preservation. And so the train moved on for days on end, and we wound up eventually in Germany. And when the doors flung open, and the soldiers, how many of them on the tarmac, there wasn't even a tarmac at that point, it was just fields all over, in the middle of nowhere. And so they were there, the soldiers in the trucks and the prisoners to take us in. And as we got out of those cattle cars, they were beating us. Raus, Juden, raus, raus, get out of this, get out of the, they were yelling. And so I find myself in a place that I didn't know exactly where. But as it happens, they put us up on trucks, very short order, and they took us in to the camp, to the infamous concentration camp of Dachau. That was in southern Germany. In Dachau, they processed us, they deloused us, they disinfected us, they gave us striped clothing, ill-fitting shoes that belonged to somebody else, and they processed us. And what they did is the uniforms that they gave us, the striped clothing, they had a number on it. And henceforth, from that moment on, they took away your identity, and you became known as a number. Not even your name was yours. And so at roll call, only the number was called, no names. You became anonymous, dehumanized, and you barely exist, only for one purpose, to serve the Nazis' end, and that is to take everything they can out of you in terms of labor, free labor. As long as you can be a laborer and do useful work for them, you will live. They'll let you live. The minute they realize that you can no longer do this, you are dead wood, and they kill you. This is the existence I find myself in, along with so many others. So in Auschwitz, in Dachau, we stayed and labored and worked very hard on repairing bombed out railroad tracks and building bunkers for the Germans and being waist deep in wet cement, trying to keep it soft by thrashing it with a machine. It was backbreaking. We were not given any help whatsoever. In other words, not only not inadequate food, we had no access to medical care. We had no access to a hospital or a doctor or medicine, anything. Anybody that got sick, died, or whatever, that's it. They bury you in mass graves and burn the corpses. And that's the end of that. Anonymous people died anonymously by the thousands. After some time in Dachau, they decided to transfer certain groups to subcamps. One of those subcamps was called Kaufering. Terrible, infamous place. And I wound up in this group, and they threw me in the subcamp of Kaufering. In Kaufering, I was laboring for about a year, from 1944 to about the beginning of 1945. There people were dying of starvation. When they put me in those cubicles again, just like in Auschwitz, where I was supposed to be assigned to sleep, I said good night to the person to the right of me, to the left of me. When I got up in the morning, I was the only person alive. Both of them were dead. That repeated itself on a daily basis. I was at that point about close to 17 years old, not quite. I was laboring there for about a year, as I said. I tried to survive by any means at my disposal. I was very cunning. I was using my trade as a tailor to survive that camp, because I was offering my services to the superiors, to the capos, offering to create clothing for them, vests, gloves. But if they only give me some material and a needle and some thread, I can do this. Because everybody was cold, everybody was freezing, people were having frostbites. It was a terrible conditions we lived in, even the superior capos. And so they did supply me, the capos did, they wanted that stuff. They supplied me illicitly with blankets, military blankets, that they got from the canteen somehow. And in secret, I was kept in the barracks, that they protected me in that way so that I could create this clothes for them. And this is where tailoring came in to save my life, because I didn't have to go out on back-breaking work. I could stay in the warm barrack while everybody else was going to the work. And so I was working as a tailor, creating favors to those that were superior to me. It helped me to survive that Kaufering camp. But after a while, that camp was so infected that it became an epidemics camp. And also, another thing was converging. The war was coming to an end without beknownst to me, to us, because we had no communication, but it did. And so the Allies already were in Germany proper. The Russians already were in Germany as well. And Germany was squeezed on all sides. And they decided at that time, the commandant of the camp, to eliminate all the camps in the south, transport the able-bodied people north to Bergen-Belsen, to another infamous camp. And so we were told to just take out the blanket that we had, that's the only thing we had, and we were taken on trains again to go to Bergen-Belsen, north. And we found ourselves on those trains, packed with prisoners from all those subcamps. There were men and women, because there was a women's camp there too. And so on the journey going north, about maybe less than an hour of ride with the train, the train stopped in a very thick forest. And before long, another train from the opposite direction came. There were two tracks going through the forest, and that was a purely military train. It was visible because they had anti-aircraft cannons sticking up in the air, so you couldn't camouflage it too well. And so they stopped right across from us. And we stand there, and we stand there for hours and hours. It doesn't go forth, it doesn't go back. Nobody tells us what we should do or what to expect. We were heavily guarded by German soldiers, German SS, and there was the actual Luftwaffe and the military, the German military, on that military train. And so before long in the day, as the day progressed, I heard all of a sudden a tremendous roar in the background, because our trains were cattle cars. They had no roofs. And I heard this tremendous noise like jets. I didn't recognize it as jets. I didn't know what a jet was. I didn't ever see a jet before in my life. But it was a very unknown, kind of frightening noise that I heard on the horizon. And they were actually jets. They were American jets. They saw from the air the two trains. And they thought that because they saw the military train, they also thought that the other train was also military. And they descended upon us in the middle of the day. And they came down low, and they machine gunned everything in sight. And they set the locomotives on fire. And all the people in our train, the prisoners, they died in front of me. There was a river of blood. There was a horror. And I said to my two friends that also survived the war with me, they were next to me, I says, we got to jump this train because we're going to be killed from the air. They just make a round, come back and start all over again. Let's not wait. So the minute they left and they made their round, we jumped the train into the forest. And the Germans threatened us to kill us, to shoot at us if we do. But we had no choice. Doesn't matter what bullet I die, from the German or from the air, I don't want to die. So we jumped into the forest, the three of us. And all the other people start jumping as well. And so what happens was the pilots from the air realized that all these people jumping in this train had striped clothing. And they realized we were prisoners, not military. So they stopped. But when they stopped, the mayhem already was done. And so many of our people perished by American hands, unbeknownst to the pilots. And in that forest, we stayed for about 3 days and 3 nights. And we were very heavily guarded. Nobody tells us what to expect, when this is going to end, where we're going from here. But one day, we wake up cold, because it was the beginning of, it was in May. In the beginning of May, it was still early spring, and it was drizzle during the night, and we were wet and cold and huddled against each other for some warmth. And so when we wake up after the third day, I heard noises from our people, the elder ones, yelling to the rest of us, "Hey guys, there are no Germans. They all left. They're not here anymore." And nobody believed this, because that night before there were so many. They were swarming all over the place. So what happens is, these Germans knew that the war is coming to an end, that Germany is losing the war, and they decided overnight to shed their military uniforms and they prepared civilian clothing. They donned the civilian clothing and disappeared into the countryside, into the civilian population, and left us alone in the forest. When we realized that we are alone in the forest, after a while, we had to wrap this around our head first. Then we start thinking, what's next? And they said, the elder ones especially, they said, let's raid the military train. I bet they're full of food. And everybody was starving. So we did raid the train. And certainly indeed, we found masses of cans and pork and beans and all this heavy stuff. And people were raiding. They were so emaciated. They were trying to open those cans. They didn't have an opener. So they were banging it on any hard surface they could find just to pry it open and get some food. And many succeeded. Many didn't. I didn't. But those that did, and they stuffed themselves with this food, let me tell you something. They died because they were not prepared. Their body was so emaciated, they could not process this food. It was poison for them. They didn't know this, and they died after a few days. I took also cans of food, couldn't open it, so I said to my friends, we'll open it at the appropriate time when we have a chance. And so we took us with us. And then, after some time, people decided that we cannot continue this way alone. We didn't know where we are. We didn't know what to do. So we formed little groups, 2, 3 people in a group, and headed out in the countryside, in the meadow. It was, we were in nowhere, and we didn't know where we were. And so me and my 2 friends, we took the little blankets that we had, and we were heading out in the countryside to be able to talk to somebody, some civilization, to a human being that can tell us what to do. And as we are walking forward, maybe a half an hour or so, I see an outline in the horizon, looks like an outline of a roof, and I thought to myself, guys, let's go to this, what I see an outline of a roof, maybe there is a house there. And so we're going forward. It happened to be a big farm. And as we walk forward, we realized that we walked into a hornet's nest because the entire area was swarming with German military. I said, oh my God, what did we get into? But we were just so close that the forward patrol noticed us and started yelling at us, halt, nicht weitergehen, don't go any further. So we stopped and he comes in and he says, wer sind Sie denn, was machen Sie denn hier? Who are you and what are you doing here in Germany, he said. And I told him, we were abandoned by the military. We don't know what to do. We were looking for some guidance for someone, what to do next. And he says, you can't stay here. Ihr könnt hier nicht bleiben, das ist ein militärisches Gebiet. You cannot remain here because it's a military area, he says. I said, sir, what do you expect us to do? He says, you come with me, the 3 of you. So he takes us into the hut. It wasn't a hut, it was a really beautiful farmhouse. And when the door opened, I saw the most fattest person in the world, a general, with metal, full of metal, a German, facing us. He was sitting in like a prince in an overstuffed chair, looks at us, bedraggled 3 kids, and he says the same thing. Who are you and what are you doing here? And I told him. He says, ihr könnt hier nicht bleiben, das ist ein militärisches Gebiet, müsst ihr fortgehen. You cannot remain here, this is a military area, you have to go back where you came from. Okay, so we turn around and we go back. As we go back, about maybe 10, 15 minutes of walking, we heard a voice of an old man in German yelling at us, halt, Burschen, halt, geht nicht wieder. Ich wollte mit euch sprechen. Stop, boys, stop. Don't go any further. We want to talk to you. I want to talk to you. And so he runs towards us. And he was an older man, and he identifies himself as the owner of the farm. He was the farmer. He says, in German, he says, wer spricht Deutsch von euch? Who of you is speaking German? So I raised my hand. I spoke a good German at that time. And he says, listen, this military is going to leave momentarily. The front is very, very near. The war is coming to an end. You are coming with me. I'll put you up and give you shelter. All of a sudden, somebody's nice to us. I just didn't know what happened. So sure, we took him up on it, and so we went with him. He took us to his barn, to one of the barns that he had on that farm, and he put us up on a step of hay. We stayed there for a little while, then he came back with his wife, and she is carrying a big tray with freshly baked donuts with jelly, with hot milk, and we haven't seen food like that for 6 years. And she says, "Ihr Burschen müsst ja so hungrig sein. You boys must be starving." I said, "Boy, did we starve." Yes. And so we gulped it down, and we start slowly realizing that something good is happening. We just didn't quite know what. After 3 days on that farm, I happened to be in the outhouse because that's the only place we could go. And my two friends were just outside, whatever they were doing, and suddenly I hear, while I'm in the outside, I hear a rumbling outside. It's like heavy machinery or tanks or something like that. And I didn't know exactly what it was. And then in all these rumblings, I hear my two friends yelling at me, "David, come out, come out. We are liberated. We are liberated." Liberated? What is that? Strange word. I said, so I run out to see what's going on. And to my astonishment, I see a column of military that is not German. Didn't know what it was. I saw tanks that certainly were not German tanks. And so the military happened to be a battalion of American soldiers, black soldiers. They were all black soldiers. They liberated us on that farm. And they were extremely nice to us, and they were trying so desperately to communicate with us. They spoke English. I didn't speak English at that time. I spoke Polish, I spoke Yiddish, I spoke German. I did not speak English. I couldn't communicate with them. And I was begging them when they were trying to communicate with their hands, with their eyes. And I kept on begging, "Are you speaking Yiddish?" "No." "Are you speaking German?" "No." "Are you speaking?" "No, just English." Well, I didn't speak English. So we were frustrated. And all this frustration, in the middle of the column rises up a white American officer, a tall, slanky man, very bemedaled, must have been some kind of a high-ranking officer. He comes straight towards us three boys. And he says, in unadulterated Yiddish, he says, "Ihr Englisch sind Jiden. You boys, are you Jewish?" And I'm just flabbergasted. I says, "Sir, you're an American soldier. How come you speak such a Yiddish?" And he looks at me and laughs. He says, "I'm from Brooklyn." Well, I didn't know what Brooklyn was from Madagascar. But okay, so I was able to communicate all of a sudden with somebody. And he says, "Listen, the war is at an end. Germany has capitulated. The American forces have taken great parts of Germany under their administration. And you come with me. You're not staying here another minute. You come with me. I will take you to a displaced person camp in the city of Feldafing that the American government has established. There you will be given medical care, all the care you need, enough food to eat, new clothing, and boys, I can tell you from here on, you are free men. The war is at an end." And that is how the war has ended for me. Thank you very much.
Would you like to grab a seat? Oh, do you want to sit in the chair?
Yeah.
Here's some water. Well, what a challenging, moving story. And I kept looking back at students, and I'm so appreciative that you are hearing this and part of this remembrance. David, you're 95 years young, and The things you've seen, so many of us will never experience, so our gratitude is unending. And what strikes me in all of these horrors and all of this tragedy is kindness. That in your story, in your journey, in spite of all the horrors, that there was moments of kindness. And it was through your cunning and through that kindness that you are here with us today, celebrating being 95 years young on Holocaust Remembrance Day. So if you wouldn't mind maybe reflecting from the time you were caught stealing food and they spared your life, whether it was the moment they called your name in the warehouse, or the fact that Yiddish-speaking Brooklyn soldier came to speak on your behalf. I'd love for you to reflect how those, what those moments of kindness meant to you and what you felt, so that our students here can think about the small acts of kindness they can enact in their daily lives.
Well, kindness was in very short supply during the war, because most of the people that were affected were so preoccupied with just surviving. From moment to moment, there was just no room in their hearts for kindness. But when it happens on rare occasions, then, of course, you appreciate it so very much. One of the kindnesses shown to me was when I was in camp in Kaufering, and the foreman of that barracks that I was assigned was a French Jewish man. He was about my father's age, and when I was very, very sick and really could have died any time, he promised to help me. He took a liking to me because he said, David, you resemble so much my own son. He was about your age when he was taken away from me. And I hope that whatever kindness I can show to you, someone is going to reciprocate to my son somewhere, and maybe it'll be in good stead. Whatever his motives were, he provided for me. I don't know how he got this. He provided for me lemonade. It's unheard of, and fed me at a time where it probably saved my life. I was just very, very sick, and I survived. My body evidently did overcome the illness. I had pneumonia. I was very sick. I survived that war. So that was a moment of kindness that I experienced. There were a few other times, of course, where my aunt took me into her home and told me that I should live with them. Folks, I can just only tell you this. My account of survival should serve as a tremendous lesson. The first lesson to understand is this. My survival is a microcosm of what happened in this tragedy. You need to multiply it 6 million times to realize the depth of that tragedy. It is unprecedented in history. It is unheard of in the annals of history. And it is something to be very frightened about, that tragedies like that can occur if we let it. When the Holocaust started, it didn't fall down from the sky. It just didn't happen. The Holocaust was a meticulously planned plan. It was meticulously executed, and it was executed step by step by step. And it started, after Hitler came to power, it started with words. It started with poisonous words, words of denigration of a minority. It started with insulting words. It started with dehumanizing words. And those words became poisonous. And they were adapted and adopted by great masses of people. by a charismatic leader that promised them the world if they only would follow him. And they did follow him. And so they were helping Hitler implement his nefarious plan. Now, in addition to this, remember this: the world at large was silent in the face of the Holocaust. They knew exactly what was happening. The papers had articles about it. There were people trying to spread the word. It came to the highest echelons of government. It became known to everyone. And Roosevelt and Stalin and Churchill and everybody knew it. But they chose not to lift a finger to prevent Hitler from this nefarious execution of the Holocaust. Is that a lesson to be learned? Yes, a tremendous lesson. The lesson is that if you see evil arising in the face, if you see evil arising and you are silent and you are ambivalent or you are apathetic, you are inviting evil to flourish. Don't ever forget that.
Well, thank you. My second question was going to be about lessons learned, but since you've covered that, I think we have 4 educators around. Please raise your hand. And if you are a student in the audience, and student means younger, so if you're a student in the audience, please go to one of those educators and state your name and your question, and we can begin this Q&A portion. And if you are shy, in the meantime, I would love for you, David, to share a little bit more about your friends and what maybe brought back that humanity to you since that time was so trying.
Did you say my friends?
Yes, you had 2 friends with you,
Yes,
and
yes,
then a
yes.
life afterwards.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, my 2 friends survived the Holocaust with me, and they survived the war. So after the war, but the war ended, I was 17 years old, close to 18, in 1945, in May. And when it ended, and we were free people, I, for one, find myself having difficulty handling that freedom. After 6 years of enslavement and horror, I didn't know how to handle it. And I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know where to turn, what my next step is supposed to be, what my future is going to be. Where am I going from here? I find myself in a strange country after a while because I left Germany when I couldn't find anyone. I was looking for someone in Sweden. So I went to Sweden with the Red Cross to be rehabilitated. I was not well at that time. And so in Sweden, as I said, I find myself in a strange country with a strange culture, with a strange language, and alone, without anybody that I knew survived with me. I didn't know at that time about my dad having survived either. And so I went through a very wrenching period of time, and I knew that I'm a free person, but how do I use this freedom to do something good for my life? I had no good answers and no guidance either. But I was smart enough and savvy enough and street smart enough to make a decision. And I made a decision for myself that I am not going to let the darkest time of my life determine my future. I decided to put that dark time behind the rug, if you will, under the rug. Keep it there, because you cannot forget something like that, and you don't want to. But my life has to go on. I was 17, 18 years old. I need to do something. I have a life ahead of me. And I could not let that burden of the Holocaust wear me down the rest of my life and to destroy me in the end. That would make Hitler win. And so I didn't want to do this. And that's what my decision was. And so I found the love of my life very shortly in Sweden. She was a beautiful girl from Czechoslovakia. And she shared my values. She was a Jewish woman from a loving, large family as I was. We had a lot of things in common. We got married after a very short courtship, and we formed a family, and we had 2 beautiful children within 2 years. And by the age I was 20, I find myself to support 4 people in the family, a wife with 2 children at the age of 20. Luckily, again, I had my trade in my hand, and I could make a living with it. And so this is how I restarted my life. And I left the dark part of it behind me. And I just moved on forward to a better future. And actually, that decision was the best decision I ever made, because my wife happened to share my values in every way. And together, we were striving to create a future, and we did. And for this, I'm very grateful.
I love that. So, the darkest times in your life do not define you. I love that takeaway. So let's start with our first student question.
Yeah, the fruits of my labor.
Right here.
The fruits of my labor. Yeah.
I'm Olivia Dickinson from Valley View Middle School. I'm 14 years old. Now, I was wondering, how would you compare your thoughts and feelings at the beginning of the Holocaust and when it ended?
I didn't quite
So she's asking, how would you compare your thoughts and feelings about the Holocaust at the beginning to when it ended? Like, how did your mindset change?
A comparison between how it started and how it ended?
How you felt at the beginning versus how you felt at the end.
Well, in the beginning, I was just bewildered. I was 11 years old when it started. Didn't know how to interpret it. Even though the Holocaust was very slowly implemented, nevertheless, I find myself right in the middle of it. And I was thrown into a vice. I was thrown into a crucible. I was just totally at a loss about why this is happening and why have we been chosen to suffer? I mean, what ills did we ever do in society? I couldn't understand any of that in the beginning, okay? And at the end, I was 6 years older, and I had 6 years of suffering behind me, and I saw light in a different way, life. And so I evaluated it differently, and different issues come to play at that point. And so at the end, I found myself free all of a sudden, and I didn't know how to handle it. It was just something that I wasn't prepared for either. And when it happened, I had to find ways how to handle it. But evidently I was resourceful enough and resilient enough and had experience enough in life to find ways how to make it work for me. And so there it is. There is a difference.
Well, thank you. Let's hear from our next student question, please.
My name is Leah Pecora. I'm from Chaparral, and I was wondering, like, what number you got when you came to the camp as one of the 200 people?
So could you clarify that?
I didn't get it.
Yeah.
She wanted the number that you had.
Oh, she wanted to just know the number you were assigned, if you remembered that.
Oh,
today.
this I do not remember.
Well,
No, I do not remember that. But we were only known by a number.
Now, I think there's a question upstairs.
Hello, David. My name's Abel Velasquez. I'm a junior, and I want to know what helped you. Well, did you have hope? Like, what inspired you to keep moving forward through the whole Holocaust and the whole situation? Because your story really inspired me.
Well, first he said your story very much inspired him, but what gave you hope throughout?
What gave me hope?
Yeah, what gave you hope?
Okay, so the situation I find myself in during the war, and no matter whether I was in the ghetto in Lodz or whether in the ghetto in Stryków or whether I was in a concentration camp, those were hopeless places. There was no hope, evidently, because no one knew if he's going to survive the next moment, and there was no one to give you hope. But there was one instance during that period of the war that really brought my hope up high. And that was something I didn't mention yet. While I was in the ghetto in Lodz, the Germans were transporting in other contingents of Jews from around Europe, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, from all over, and they were transporting them back into the ghetto of Lodz to work as labor. And when such a transport came, the news of it was like spreading like wildfire. Everybody came to that holding area where these new arrivals came, and we were looking for someone among the arrivals, if maybe someone we recognize, if maybe someone that maybe has some kinship with us. We wanted to have some news from the outside. And so I went there too. I was a kid still, and I was looking for someone that I may recognize. I didn't. And then as I was turning back, I heard my name called from within inside that holding her. Hey, David, wait, come back, I want to talk to you. So I turned back and I see a man, relatively young man, and he says, "You're David Lenga, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah, you know me?" "Yeah." "Well, who are you?" "I am the friend of your dad's." "Really?" I says, "Do you know anything about my dad?" Because I thought by that time he was dead. So he says, "Yeah, I was working with him in the concentration camp in Poznan, Kutno." That was a terrible labor camp. I said, "You were with my dad?" That was in the middle of the war. And he says, "Yeah, I left him about 2-3 weeks ago." "Oh, they broke 3 of his ribs, but he survived. He's still okay." "Really?" That is the first time I heard, after he was taken away from us, that he's alive even. And that news gave me such hope. So now I have somebody to live for, somebody to survive the war for, somebody to be with maybe one day. That gave me such hope. It really lifted my spirit.
It's a great question.
Hi, my name is Rose. I'm from Santa Paula High School, and I'm currently a senior. And then my question for you was, after you became a free man, did you still keep in contact or have a communication with the 2 men you survived with?
She asked that after the war, did you keep in contact with your 2 friends that you survived with?
For a while, we kept in touch, as it were. People, many of them, including my friends, were pining for go back to their hometowns, wherever they came from. One of them was from Belarus, and so he went back to his home. And the other one, Roman, went to Canada, I understand, and I lost track. And I really lost track, and we just weren't in touch. So I haven't been able to keep up with them.
It's a great question. Please know there wasn't social media or cell phones at the time.
No, there was nothing like that.
Much more challenging.
Nothing like that, no. Once somebody lost track, that's it.
Well, we have time for one more question, I believe, right? And are we heading over here?
Hi, I'm Scarlett Shields from Chaparral Middle School, and I was wondering, what is one thing that you would say to your younger self?
Her question is, what is one thing you would say to your younger self?
One thing that I would say. The one thing that I would say to the younger generation in particular.
Younger self. What would you say to your younger self? What would you say to yourself?
Of myself? When? Now?
When you were younger.
Oh, when I was younger.
Knowing what you know now.
Well, when I was younger, I had great hopes for myself. My father gave me those hopes because he was a manufacturer, and he always kept telling me, "You're my oldest son, and when you grow up, I want you to take over the factory. I want you to become a chemical engineer. I want you to make the factory thrive and expand and be there part of it, be the head of it." This was the hope that he gave me, and this is what I was hoping one day to do. Until, of course, 1939, when Hitler invaded Poland and everything came to a crushing end. And my whole future just drowned in what happened next. And the rest is history. Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you are a different person than when you first came in here this morning, and sharing in this collective humanity and remembrance together is a great privilege for me and a moment of celebration that you're with us. Jonathan from our team is going to come to the stage and give directions, but before that, I would love for you to join in a warm round of applause one more time.
Thank you.